All right. TJ Simon
Yes.
is one of the members over at Wolf and Simon Realty here in Park Rapids. Been a realtor for many years. A friend of mine since I moved to town. And I guess as far as your accolades, you got quite a few. But most recently, you were the president of the Minnesota Association of Realtors.
Correct.
That's the entire state, right?
That is the entire state.
Do you have any national aspirations here?
I do not have any national aspirations. No, it's been it was an absolute joy to be a part of that. In 2021, obviously with COVID and everything going on with that, there was a lot of different things that we had to go through.
You were a wartime president.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was something we hadn't seen, so it's been interesting and be able to make sure that we kept real estate as an essential service, and to understand and dealing with some of the states that it was not an essential service. So we got to have some of those conversations and work through some of that to make sure we continue to be an essential service.
Now, I mean, just from my own experience having lived through COVID and everything like that, just in terms of like psychologically, like what was going through people's minds. I mean, I think, you get into like March of 21 and it's almost like this state of panic with the lockdowns and everything like that. And then eventually people started thinking about planning for the future and everything like that. What did this uncertainty really at the early stages of 2021 do to people's psychology when it came to buying or selling real estate?
Let's be honest, 2021, it's let's buy. COVID happened. Some of the significance and the increase of people moving to the area starting in that time. 2021 in Minnesota real estate is the highest it's ever been sold. Our market right here, jumped from a normal 115 to 120 million a year to 140 million, I think it was 149 million in 2021. It was our peak of the amount of real estate sold in Hubbard County.
So we live in a rural county, so to speak, right? I mean, I know that Park Rapids has got 4,000 residents now, but so it's not like we're completely in the sticks or anything like that. But do you feel like that this was a statewide increase in real estate, or was this just something where it was people moving from the Twin Cities to another part of the state because they're kind of trying to retreat from civilization?
Yeah, I think that was more of it. I mean, we saw more of it in the rural areas, people being able to work from home. And so when you could work from home, you could come to your cabin. We have really good internet service here, and so people were able to use that internet service to be able to work from here and make home base here. And then once they were here, they haven't left.
That was my next question.
Yeah, they haven't left. I mean, so you're seeing the increase in schools, the amount of kids in schools, and they've been the ability to be able to do that.
So I guess just in terms of total population, I think when I moved here, which was like in 2016 or 2017, I think the sign outside Park Rapids used to say something like 3,200. Yeah. And now I think, what does it say, 4,400?
Yeah, I believe so. And I think we're just seeing it, and not only just people residence-wise of it's the summer people too. That's increased. I mean, they've sold the home in the metro, whether it's Fargo or Minneapolis, and they've just chosen to have their home up here, and they've used this as their home base rather than having it be their cabin.
And has there been an increase in inventory that's commensurate with the demand in this area?
No. I can talk about that. In 2020, our inventory, you look at a January level of active listings, would be like 300 to 400. I think at top in 2020, there was some. In 2019, there was like 400 homes active listings. Right now, last year, we never topped 200. Active listings January 2025, 138.
Wow.
And so it's really, we just don't have, even though it seems like more stuff's coming on, it's starting to pick up. It's not the pickup of what was in 2019, 2020, and those amount of inventory. So we're still lacking inventory at this point.
I mean, as far as building is concerned, I don't really know much about the cost of materials and all that stuff or whatever the other economic factors that go into that, but is there are there building projects and developments going on now? Or?
There's a few spec houses being built, but there's not a ton of them. There is some, there's some going on, but
and they get snapped up quick.
Right, and the building costs. I mean, it's tough to build a house for under $400,000, and I mean in this market.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference. And with interest rates, we were looking at interest rates of 2.75, 3, and that's really what gave the affordability for some of these people to move up and be a part of here, or they're selling in different markets for significant more value, and moving here to be able to buy something that's a lesser value but a nicer home. So we've seen some of that stuff, and we just don't have the inventory, and we can't build our way out of it because there's not enough lots, there's not enough lake lots or anything like that where we can build our way out of inventory. We just have to continue, and you lose someone that's sitting with 2.75, 3% interest rate. It's tough for them to sell that house and upgrade to the next level if you bought a house for 150
just because of the mortgage payment.
Just because of the mortgage payment. Mortgage rates right now are between 5.5, 6, 6.5. We're seeing it jump around. It's kind of volatile right now, and you just can't make that jump. So you're holding out those people that are moving up, those move up buyers. They're not there because they're just sticking tight where they're at and updating what they have and renovating what they have and continue to keep that low interest payment.
I know, we've talked a lot on this podcast about all the good things about this area. It's got a great central location as far as its proximity to places like Bemidji and DL, Wadena and Walker. It's kind of like the crossroads of all of that. So many beautiful lakes and public land around for hunting and stuff like that. I mean, it's a desirable area to be in this state, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And you see people that have been here, and it's not only just people that move here to live here. People are vacationing here, and they want to be here. And once they vacation here and they meet the people and they spend some time here, this is where they want to move to when they retire. It's really, we have some great resources here, natural resources, and I think that's really one of those things that people want to have. You don't have those. Every lot on the lake's not 25 feet wide, and you have, like, you're moving from your neighborhood to your neighborhood on the lake. You have some elbow room in some of these lakes, and that gives some of the ability for these people to be able to stretch out and have some, privacy when they're there.
And why would someone from the Twin Cities, let's just say hypothetical buyer, choose this area over, like you named the other different areas in the state that have access to lakes and things like that?
We're still, our values here are still lower than, if you just look around and go look at a lake home in Walker, you look at a lake home in Detroit Lakes, and you look at a lake home here, you're going to get more value of a home, more value of a lake in our market still continue to right now than what you would in those markets.
Yeah.
What
do you think could be done, and just in terms of bringing in different kinds of businesses or industry, or maybe that would be a bad thing, but to increase the attractiveness of this market to potential buyers from elsewhere?
Well, we're going to need to have inventory because we have buyers here. If you talk to some locals, they're asking for these people to come work here. It's tough to find them a place to live, and I think that's a challenge. And so we do need some inventory, but I don't know if we can build our way out of it. I don't think that's a problem, but we have the opportunity. There are houses to buy.
Right.
You just can't come in and look at 12 houses in a day and expect to buy one that day. But we have inventory, and there's houses to be bought, and people that are persistent and want to buy a house, they do buy houses. Real estate's being sold right now.
And I suppose that's one of the many services that you provide as a realtor, is having these relationships with buyers that could last for a year or more.
Oh, yeah.
And telling you kind of what their specifications are, and then you're the one that has your kind of finger on the pulse of what's going on up here at the time, and you can notify people and get them into good situations.
And it's important for a buyer.
On the buyer side.
It's important for a buyer to understand what the market is, because if you go look at a house in Detroit Lakes and you look at a house here, there's such different vasts and values.
Mm-hmm.
So it's our job to help them, educate them, and go look at a few houses to say, hey, this is the value. This is why this lake demands more money than this lake. This is why this house demands more money than this house.
Yeah.
You know, when you can buy a Rambler that you're going to have no steps, you're hitting the generations that can buy it. You're getting the first-time home buyers that can buy it with kids, and you're getting the older generations that's moving off the lake into that Rambler. So you're getting both sides of it, where sometimes a split entry, an older generation might not want to have steps.
Right.
You know, they want to have that single-level living or something like that. So your values can be a little different at that point, you know. So I think that's important for us to be able to work through them. And, you know, anyone at our office is going to work with buyers for 1, 2, 3 years because they start looking usually 5 years prior to their retirement.
Yeah,
you know,
before retirement.
Yeah, they just start having that little touch to say, I'm thinking this is where we want to go. This is where we want to go. We go look at a few houses, and then it's our responsibility to keep in touch with them and make sure, hey, this value is here. You know, and when we have the increase we've had, I don't know how many of my buyers that didn't buy in the last 4 years all say, man, we should have bought that one. We should have bought then, right? I mean, we've seen a 38% increase in median values in Hubbard County since 2020.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that there's probably, that wouldn't be buyer's remorse. That'd be more like fear of missing out.
That's
right?
exactly right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's where you saw the multiple offers and those types of things of people, you know, you have markets that were selling, you know, in that market of 2021. You know, it was not uncommon to see multiple offers, 10, 12 offers on a property. You know, in today's market, something priced right and, you know, on a good lake, and we're still seeing multiple offers. Yeah. It's just if the value is correct.
You mentioned having the knowledge about the different lakes and stuff like that. And I know you're an outdoorsman, so that probably serves you pretty well in being able to answer questions about the different species that are prevalent in all the different lakes and stuff like that, right? That's something that's not on a real estate listing online.
Correct, exactly. And it's understanding when someone wants, you know, let's be honest, everyone wants level sand shoreline. That's what they want. But we don't have that always. You know, all the level sand shoreline has been built on. I mean, that's where people are starting to say, okay, I'll take the land. You can always adjust the house that's on the land, but that lakeshore we can't change.
Right.
You know, so I mean, it's really important to say, hey, this is what I want for the house. And you say, okay, I know you want that for the house, but let's go take a look at this lot, and you tell me if this lot is going to work for you, and let's see if we can make that house work for you. So you have to be able to look at the whole picture and not just walk into a development of, you know, growing up in the cities, walking up into a development, and it's all the same house, just flipped either way. Yeah. You aren't picking like that. Every lake home we go in is different. Yeah. You know, it could have been upgraded from a cabin, or it could have been a new build. You know, so it's different in that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, because I suppose there's a lot of the lake properties are, you know, built like, I guess, you know, pre-war and all that stuff, even, right? And
some of the best lakeshore, the cabins, you know.
You know, there's this rule that I mean, I've heard this before, and, you know, I don't know if this is just like whatever you call it, like a popular knowledge or whatever, but a lot of people think that if you've got a cabin and you want to completely rebuild it or whatever, as long as you leave like one wall standing or something like that, that you can get around all the zoning requirements and stuff like that.
Well, I'll be the first one to say you cannot get around all zoning requirements.
Yeah.
You know, it's important to have those conversations. It's important to have those conversations with the zoning to understand what you can get to. Yeah. They are great to work with. Yeah. And understanding they want to be able to protect the water and protect the, you know, for everybody, not just you, but for your neighbors. But they have really come a long way in working with people to make sure that, and understanding that for a long time, these were seasonal cabins that people only used in the summertime. They didn't come up here in the winter. Yeah. And now they're understanding that, okay, it's year-round homes. Some of these places need to be upgraded. Some of these places, and how do you get that septic in there? How do you get that well in there? You know, and they have to work with that rather than on these smaller lots they do on these smaller lakes.
Okay, so it is late April 2025, and I would imagine that things are really starting to heat up for you at this point in time.
Yeah, we've seen a significant increase of people, obviously being a Friday on getting ready for opening fishing. I mean, you can just see the traffic's picking up.
Sure.
There's a lot more traffic I'm in town. The phone calls are ringing.
Yeah.
As we get through April and March and April, and you have those warm days in March, people start to call slowly, and then all of a sudden
it really is that dependent on the weather.
And then we get snow, and they stop calling. So I mean, we're so dependent on the weather, and they think, okay, the dock's in, it's warmer in the city, so they're thinking it's got to be warmer up here. We still have ice in. But now with ice out and the warm weather and everything opening up, we really have seen a significant increase of traffic. Yes.
Okay, so I know there isn't a ton of inventory right now. So if there are people who are considering selling, though, what are some things that sellers can do or should do before, or they contact a realtor, or I mean maybe that's the first thing they do. But if as they're getting ready or they've made the decision now we're going to be selling the house, what are some tips that sellers might be able to follow in order to maximize the value?
Yeah, my first thing is reach out. Reach out and call one of us, because I think when you call us, we're able to work through with the process. Some people think I got to update everything before I get there, and so then they're so overwhelmed with the process that they miss out on actually putting it on the market. Whereas when we come out and we say, hey, worry about this, don't worry about that. Work up this clutter, get rid of some of that stuff, and that'll help you in the process. The rest of it, don't worry about. And I think that's the biggest thing. So we're able to help them through that process, and know it's from start to finish. We're out there from the beginning saying you need to do this and do that, and we understand it's emotional. You're selling some family homes. When you're dealing with stuff. We dealt with a gentleman 2 years ago that had been coming to the Park Rapids area for 80 years. He was 86 years old. Wow. And he sold his place. And it was such a experience for us. It was more than the price didn't matter. Anything about that. It was the emotion of selling it and looking at us at closing and saying, I'm going to sign this and I'm not coming back. Like, you realize that. And I mean, it was very emotional for us. But we have to realize that this is where everyone's memories were made. And that some of these lake homes buyers have been in the family 50, 60 years, and people not that they don't want them, they just can't afford them, or life's different now that they're not.
Or you've got a situation where it's got to be split between siblings
for sure.
and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and it just doesn't work that way, And so it's good. It's I say get us involved sooner the better, because it may be less work than what you think to be ready. Because
that's a really good tip, because I think a lot of people think that, before I can sell, I got to redo the bathroom. Correct. I got to redo this. I got to redo that. And I mean, generally speaking, you probably, maybe you would in some cases, but you don't necessarily get dollar for dollar return on your investment, right?
Especially if they're going from an old cabin that they use seasonally, and they only come up here in the summer, and the next buyer is going to use it year round. So they're going to renovate these cabins already, because of the shoreline or because of whatever it might be. So as much as what they put into it might be tore out, could be.
Because really, I mean, it's like, what are they say the 3 rules of real estate: location, 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 right? That's it.
When you're talking about lakes, that's the way it is. But it's the same that goes for goes for our country homes and our city homes too. Location of where it is or what people are looking for. We don't have a lot of city homes. People want to get into a house. It's how you gain wealth.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the one thing about a house that cannot be changed,
correct.
Right? So it's the one constant in all of this is where it is.
Correct.
In relation to other places. Okay, now when it comes to buyers, I mean, you mentioned that, there's already your phones are already kind of ringing off the hook and all that stuff in the spring. And maybe the answer is not the spring, but what would be the best time for a buyer coming into this area to look to really kind of maximize their value or get a good bargain? Let's say.
I don't know bargain. I think it's getting the right piece of property. I think the right piece of property or the house that you're looking for. I think it takes time. I always tell people it's not an emotion. This is still a
Can't
business.
impulse buy a house.
It's still a business transaction.
Sure.
And you want to have some of those conversations to start with. And I think getting us engaged, it's really easy to look at pictures and the internet and all this stuff. And I don't want to talk to them because I don't want to be pressured. Well, we're not here to pressure you. We don't want you to buy a house that you don't want to buy. Like, that's not how we do business.
Yeah.
You need to get involved with us because maybe we got to go show you 2 or 3 houses to know, you know what, at $400,000 on the lake, that's not what I want to buy.
Right.
So maybe that year you step back and go, okay, I need to go figure out how I can spend $500,000 because at $500,000 that's going to get me the house that I want to look at. So have realistic expectations, because if I show you a house for $600,000 or I show you a house for $400,000, you're going to like the $600,000 more because it's a nicer home. There's more value in it. But if you can't afford that, then you're always comparing to try to find that house for $400,000.
Yeah.
We have to be able to set expectations of what that could be.
Yeah, and I mean, also from the seller's perspective, you have to be able to price these things accurately, otherwise they won't sell regardless, right?
And one of our biggest changes, with the lawsuit that we talked about, is that as a buyer now, when you go meet with a realtor and you're going to have to go show a house, we're going to have you sign a contract.
Yeah.
We have to have you sign a contract in order to get you into that house. That's legal for us to have to do that. So
let's just put a little context to this first, because you mentioned that case. You brought it up, but so there was this case. It was the Sitzer-Burnett case, and I think it started in 2020 or something, and then it ended in 2023. Yep. Some big class action case. Yep. And the MLS was directly involved, or the
right. I mean, there were some implications towards our national association.
Right.
Everyone can talk about there was a big payout of $460 million that was paid out, and we can go through some of that process. But what ultimately changed? The biggest change for us, number one, is our payout. If I'm the listing agent, my payout is no longer in the MLS. So you need to have a transparency or a conversation with your seller to say, all right, if you want to pay out to us, this is what our payout is. And if you're going to pay a buyer's agent, then that conversation is between the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. So you have that conversation, that transparency. With that, all buyers have to sign a contract, either a showing contract or a buyer's representation contract with the person showing you the house. So
each and every person.
So no longer can you call, say, hey, TJ, I want to go look at this house. I say, yeah, let's go look. Before I let you in that house, we have to sign some sort of contract, because we have to be able to talk about transparency of how we're getting paid.
Yeah, because
and that's really what it comes down to.
The rule, the cooperative compensation rule is what they talk about there, was sort of a built-in thing that said that the seller's agent would be responsible for covering a part of the buyer's agent.
Well, what it was is as we listed a piece of property, we would put on the MLS what the seller was willing to pay the buyer's agent.
Okay.
That's how it was.
As expressed as a percentage.
As a percentage. And so no longer is it on the MLS.
Yeah.
Now we have to express it on an individual basis.
I see.
So it's still expressed. A seller does not have to pay a buyer's agent, but it's usually negotiated, and it is also on our purchase agreement now. So we do have a line on our purchase agreement, so it is discussed. It's more transparent. It's not scary. Like, it's the same way we've been doing business. We're having the same conversations about it. It just should be questions you should ask it.
Yeah.
I push that a buyer, if you're a brand new buyer and you're going to look at buying a house, go ask the questions. How are we doing this? How am I going to get paid? How are you going to get paid? And who's paying me?
Right.
And we'll work through that process and answer those questions. And it's very simple. It's just a lot more questions need to be asked and talked about, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, does it actually, after these rulings, I guess, it's pretty complicated. I don't
very much
understand
so.
it, but I mean, like, just the aftermath of it all, are did the sellers win? Did the buyers win? I mean, who's better off as a result of this ruling?
I don't know if anyone won.
Okay.
I think what happens, I think the best way to look at it is we all have to be more transparent.
Okay.
And if people thought they didn't understand how it was working then, it can just be brushed under the rug. This is where we're going to be able to have these conversations. There are bad apples in all industries. Let's just be honest. Like there just is, right?
Absolutely.
I don't care what industry it is. Whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a realtor, there's bad apples.
Yeah.
You know, for us, it's about the transparency and having those conversations. If someone doesn't understand, ask the question. And I really push that to people. And you don't get the right answer you don't want, go ask someone else. Yeah.
Okay, we were chatting a little bit before about all of the like technology disruption that's been going on. I mean, I can tell you that in our business, AI has had a dramatic impact on your ability to serve your clients more efficiently. Because whereas like in the past you have to manually go through a bunch of documents and everything like that. Now, of course, you have to check it, which is where the whole idea of a professional service being applied.
Correct.
But it can be a big time saver. And I don't know if AI per se has been affecting the real estate industry, but I mean, just in terms of like, a lot of people think, okay, I'll just hop on Zillow here, click, go on to type in Park Rapids, Minnesota, see everything I need to see, and just kind of do this whole thing by myself type of thing,
No matter what you're clicking on, in the end, you're getting to a human.
Right.
And I don't care what the technology is. This is a person-to-person business.
Yeah.
And it's not about the transaction to me or my company. It's about the person-to-person relationship that you have. And you gain the trust of what I'm doing and understanding what we're doing to be able to make what's best for you. Where AI helps with some of the marketing. AI gets the stuff out there a little bit more but when people want to know the information and then they're ready to move forward and make a purchase, they need to have that confirmation and the conversation, reassurance that they're making the right decision.
Right.
And so that person-to-person transaction in the end is truly the trust you gain is really in the end how it's purchased. So it's there. AI is out there. If you told someone that has no idea about real estate, hey, I need a purchase agreement to be able to do it, they're going to Google purchase agreement. They're going to get many different things that's going to be so random and it might not be right. But when you use a realtor, you use someone that's in the industry and do it. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years and the forms have changed from 20 years ago to now, and they're significantly different, and they'll be significantly changed our forms change on a yearly basis every August.
I mean, there's so many variables that go into a real estate transaction, and I think just, having that conversation with the client to understand what does victory look like to you.
Correct.
You can't get that from any, degree of AI.
You take whatever you pick the website. They're going to give you all these numbers and all that stuff that goes with it, but they haven't been in the house. They don't know the difference between Long Lake, Big Sand, and the puddle that's just formed last week that's now called a lake of some kind. We just named it now, so now that's lake. AI and those aggregates don't understand if water frontage here is water frontage there, and you tell me the difference between a pond and Long Lake, there's a significant difference in value.
It'll just because on paper it'll just say waterfront, but you're not going to know the quality of it and all the nuance that goes with it. And then some places can look great, but then turns out, well, but have you considered this?
Pictures do amazing things.
Real estate as an investment. I had a young person reach out to me not too long ago, and she was asking me, hey, what do you know about crypto? And, which, should I buy a Bitcoin or should I buy, something, whatever the case may be. I said, I know a little bit about it. However, what I said to her is that your best bet is to try to save as much money as you possibly can and then buy a house, right? Because ultimately that is your bedrock, the bedrock of any solid financial plan.
Right.
Do you ever work with like sort of young people, like just in terms of, I mean, I know you're not a financial planner,
Yep.
but do you ever kind of give them that sort of advice or assistance when they're considering real estate as an investment?
For sure. I mean, and when you look at that, as we talked before, it's a business transaction.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to know when you're buying a property and someone goes, how do I know I'm making a good investment? When you're buying the property and you know what you're going to do to it, to know what that sale price is and not automatically add in what appreciation is. The appreciation is the nice part that comes with real estate. You know, for example, if we all would have bought everything we could afford in 2020 and now we're 40% higher, we all would have been much better off. My grandpa, my dad, everyone has said, wow, I should have bought more. And I think we should probably say the same thing. We should have bought more now because 10, 15 years down the way, it's gonna appreciate.
Right.
When 2008 happened, and we were in this great recession, and the home prices were the lowest they would ever been. Just after 2005, where we thought it was the highest prices ever got.
That bubble.
We're not even close to those.
Yeah.
Like we're so far past those prices that it doesn't even matter. You know, so it's one of those things where that investment, we talk with these young kids and work through those prices to understand that you can afford it, but you can't overbuy.
Yeah.
You can't overpay. If you're going to buy it for a rental, it has to cash flow.
Yeah.
You can't use the money to say, I'm going to supplement it by putting $300 of my own money in there every month. You can't supplement. Each property has to be able to supplement itself. In most cases, it makes sense to buy the first house that you're staying at, that you're living in, because when you live there and you sell that house, right now in tax code, if you live in that house for 2 out of 5 years, you get to write off or don't have to take the income on what you make on that house.
Yeah.
If I buy a house for $100,000 and I sell it for $150,000, that $50,000 in gain, tax code right now, make sure you check with your
capital
accountants.
gains.
Your capital gains is they don't give you a 1099.
Right.
So that's $50,000 that you make that
In
you
your
no
pocket.
longer have to pay tax on. There's very few things that can do that. And so that's a really good way to start, is doing it at the house that you're going to buy. And then we see people from that point take that money and buy another house for themselves and then start with an investment. So they're always building their portfolio that way.
Yeah. And it is so you only have to live there for 2 of 5 years, and then it's, or 2 of 12?
2 out of the 5.
2 out of 5.
Yep.
And then it's good forever.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I'm not holding you to it.
Yeah, but if you live there for 2 years,
yeah,
then you're good. Then you're
good
to go. Yep.
Yeah.
But if you live there 2 years, move out and rent it out, and now you rent it out, and now you change the classification of it, so you don't get that deduction anymore because it's now an income it's an income
generating
property. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So the IRS looks at it differently.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up here, I have this philosophy I wanted to ask you about.
Perfect.
So, I mean, it was like, I just remember this story back when I used to live in New York about how there were certain neighborhoods in New York that were at that time sort of like not run down, but just not as nice as they were, as they had become in like 20 or 30 years. There was talk that you could buy like a brownstone or something in Brooklyn for like, $30,000-$40,000 or something like that. And then you look at it being listed back in, the 2012, 2013 era or something like that. And they would always be over $1 million, right? So the question, and this is what sparked it, is that, you always say to yourself, why didn't my parents just buy that property at that time, right? So, but my theory is that there's always an opportunity like that in real estate, not necessarily in this area, but somewhere in the world, in the country, or something like that. Well, have you thought about that?
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's always. You look at. I've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
You're right. You take 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You could buy a lot of homes in Park Rapids for under $100,000.
Yeah.
$65,000, $70,000.
Yeah.
That same house today is $190,000 to $200,000.
But is it all just a crapshoot? I mean, like so if that state existed then as it does today, how do we identify those properties that are gonna, increase in value by 500 to 1,000 times.
They're not making any more lakeshore.
Okay.
We can't make any more lakes.
Sure.
Right? I mean, so if you want a sure bet that it's going to be worth more money, it's more money to get into it on a lakeshore.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to that lakeshore, they're not making any more.
No.
And I think that's the important part to understand, that time that you own it, the length of time that you own it, and it's not a menace to you to own it. The cost of ownership can be different. But the time that you own it, that length of time, it's going to be significantly better. I mean, think about some of these people that bought acreages, in the early 1980s, 1990s for, $2,000 for a 40. That same 40 is selling for $120,000 to $160,000.
Yeah, right.
But
that's what I'm saying. Like now all those are snapped up, right? But like somewhere out there,
for sure,
there's that $2,000 40-acre parcel that's just waiting to be bought, right?
For sure.
So how do we find it?
You find a realtor.
Okay.
And
Fair enough.
We're out there working for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, TJ, you guys have been great. You and Eric both have really been, good friends and helpful and everything else. I can't say enough about you guys and your firm there, Wolf and Simon. And you have, how many realtors do you have working there now?
There's 10 of us that are working there. Yeah,
10.
It's great.
And so you're located over by the BP station, kind of by L&M there.
Right in front of Walmart.
Yep. And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, is there a website or how does that go?
wolfandsimon.com.
Yeah.
wolfsimonrealestate.com, or reach out to, obviously if you go to Google and put our name in, but you can call us and we're here to help. And and I think what people don't understand, it doesn't have to be just because I want to sell right now. If you're thinking about real estate, if you have a question on real estate, we're there as people to help you through the process. If someone is starting to go through the process and like someone's getting sick and they're going to have to leave, or maybe have to leave their house to move on to something different, have those conversations with us early on, because we've been through it all. When you've been doing this as long as I have, there's a lot of different situations, and it's not about just that one day that we worry about that transaction. No, we do this for the people and be able to work through that whole process.
I mean, a stitch in time saves 9.
Yeah. Right? There you go. There you go. Yeah, exactly.
What's your geographical boundary?
We go over towards DL. We get all the way to Walker. We go up north to Bemidji, and then south almost to Wadena. So pretty good boundary.
Wonderful. Well, TJ, Simon, thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope that we don't go as long until we see each other the next time.
That sounds great.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.